I am Jim Edmonson, and this is Port Aransas, a collection of memories. Lloyd Dreyer is here to tell us about fishing in Port A, especially after the 1940s. Lloyd Dreyer was born in Aransas Pass, Texas, in a hospital in 1924. He was raised on the island and has lived here ever since birth. Lloyd first began operating private boats in 1941, which was briefly interrupted by 4 years in the war. He was in the Coast Guard during this time. In 1943, he married his wife, Eula May, in Houston. They, along with their 3 sons, have resided on the island since 1924. Lloyd, welcome this evening.
Thank you.
Let's start off. Let me bring you up to date. I talked with Mr. Ted E. Matthews about the early days of fishing from about the 19 teens until up until the fishing began to go more offshore and all. In the 1940s, though, 1941, when you first started operating private boats here on the island, what type of fishing was it then, and where were you going, and what were the boats like?
Oh, they were small boats from about 21 to maximum maybe of 26 foot. And they were small, just powered with a small gasoline engine out of the cars that we used to convert ourselves. And it was primarily consisted of mackerel and kingfish and jackfish. And we had lots of tarpon then.
The tarpon were coming in closer, weren't they?
Oh, they were right up against the jetties, and we didn't have very far to run for them. I've made the comment lots of times since then that our fuel tanks are too big and we overrun the fish. Well, that being the case, years ago the biggest fuel tank we used to have might have been 15 gallons. So you can imagine how far we could have run on 15 gallons of gas. So that not only being a deterrent from running too far, we were also limited in the number of people that we could carry, because of the weight.
Right.
Because the more weight you carry, the more gas you burn. But we always managed to make them happy and have a good day.
What were prices like then, Lloyd?
Oh, Lord, I think we were running for $8 for half a day and $12 for all day.
All right. And did you furnish the bait?
No, we didn't furnish nothing. The tourists or the fishermen rented the rods and reels and paid for the bait and the ice that they used, and of course they brought the meals and the soda waters and things.
Was most of this out of the tarpon inn then, or did a lot of people come over here and stay a week in some of the cottages and go?
Oh yes. Some of the times you'd have charters for 2-3 weeks. Same people.
Same people would fish 3 weeks?
Yeah.
All right.
But primarily, for tarpon fishing and stuff of that sort. They didn't stay that long to fish for kingfish,
And the boats were wooden, of course.
Oh yes.
Were these the Farley boats then?
Yes.
Were beginning to come in. I talked with Mr. Don Roy Farley.
Yeah.
And he mentioned to me about the Farley boats, and there was a change, and you were getting to it. You mentioned that your boats were powered by mostly the engines out of the cars, but after the war they got to where they had some surplus engines available and things,
yes.
and that's when the bigger boats and more power came in
right.
and allowed people to go a little bit farther. In the 1940s, Lloyd, what type of bait and tackle and all were you using then?
Well, we didn't have light tackle then. We didn't know what it was, to catch fish on light tackle. We thought the way to do it is bigger the tackle, the quicker you're gonna get that fish. It's not
that was the purpose.
Oh yes, was getting the fish. So we used fairly heavy tackle, and as you look back on it now, you wonder why. Because you can have so much fun with light tackle, catching a fish 2 to 3 times, up to 10 times bigger than the breaking strength of the line. Of course, we didn't have monofilament then. We were using linen, and that dates well back into about 1960 before I think that not about 1960 was when the first monofilament came out.
Did fishermen trust it?
No,
That's
no.
I remember when fiberglass boats came in. They
Well,
oh, they're too heavy and too awkward, and and I imagine the same thing took place with the changes in tackle too.
yeah. When the first monofilament was brought out, it would stretch so far that it would push the spool ends of the spool of the reel out and just blow it apart. They brought some. We were tuna fishing in the Bahamas in 1960 when they brought this out, and there was a lady using it. I think it was Dorothea Dean, and she went out there to test it. And she told her boat captain she didn't think that she'd ever use that stuff again. It just had too much stretch in it, you know. It ruined her reel, needless to say. And she was a great fisherman. Caught lots of fish.
Were the reels the same size? What was the difference in the types of reels used then and the types of reels used now?
Oh, the old ones that we used were the old pin reels. I say old pins. They were new because they'd just come out, you know, and we used to do a lot of just plain old king pole fishing before they started coming out with a decent reel. The first ones we used to call them knuckle busters because there wasn't any drag on them, and you had a leather washer on there, leather thumb drag, you know. And it was something, I tell you.
When it gets going, that thing gets smoked.
Thing backing up, you know, and you had to keep your knuckles out of the way. That's the reason why we called it a knuckle buster. And then, of course, we was using 72-pound test linen line. That'll give you an idea of the size of the line. Now we're using 12-pound monofilament for the same thing. And, of course, we caught a lot of fish because the pressure wasn't as great then as it is now.
Not as much equipment, not as pressed for time. People here one day. Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
Not as many boats.
Not
as many people fishing, see. We'd go out there. We never went very far, you know, because we didn't have to.
The very far would be what?
Seawood. 4 or 5 miles offshore. It was a long ways.
Is that about equal to the standpipe today? Or
right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sandpipe's just south of it.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, that's another mile, you know, because of direction. But past that, well, and we didn't have standpipes or drilling rigs or nothing then. We just fished out a ways. We'd use drone spoons and feather jigs and these yellow jacket creek chub plugs and this kind of thing, you know.
What all would a boat captain have to do in 1941 that he doesn't have to do today? Did he have any more responsibilities or duties? Did you have deckhands and things?
Oh, no deckhands then.
You did it all?
No, you did it all because, first off, you know, you didn't have a flying bridge and you didn't have to worry about all this extra, you know. No, we didn't have carpets on the deck, you know. We had, there's plenty of old painted wood. And we did have little cushions for the chairs that we had there. They were another Farley concoction, a fine chair for fighting the fish out of, but we didn't have any gimbals in them or anything. We had the leather rod butts, you know, rod gimbals for the men to put, or the women to put their rod butts in, but primarily, I think possibly we're still overrunning the fish. I think the tackle, of course, today gives you the benefit of the doubt of catching more fish. There's no question of that. Mm-hmm. Because the line is something that I don't believe the fish can actually see. And we've done this with blackfin tuna lots of times. You go out there and you use a leader on a leader wire on 2 hooks and put a bait down there and throw a bunch of chum in the water, and that tuna fish will come up there and swim around it and take all this other, but he won't take that leader wire. Then you can take that leader wire plumb off and put just a hook and bury it up in the bait, throw all that right back down there, and the same fish come right back, and they'll get hooked.
He can see that leader wire.
He can see the leader wire, and he can see those hooks.
Yeah, it's reflection or?
It's just something that's...
How deep is that? How deep?
Oh, you're only talking about 10 or 15 feet
Yeah,
under the water.
you're
You can see the fish when he takes your bait, you know, so he's not that far away. That's one of the purposes of throwing a chum in the water, to get him to come up, you know, and a lot of times there'll be bonita in there, and dolphin and tunas and kingfish too. Of course, you take your chance, sharks as well.
The type of fishing that was done then compared to now, the species today that you catch today, Lloyd, are there as many variety as there were then, or fewer variety, or fewer in number, or what? You mentioned something about overrunning fish. Has the amount of fish that people, and the types of fish that you're catching, has that changed much in 20 years?
No, not the type and this sort of stuff. It's just that we've learned how to take care of the fish better, which is a great thing. We don't have the waste that we had years ago because, well, you know, we just didn't have the facilities, the ice chest,
refrigeration,
or anything, you know, to take care of the fish. So consequently, there was some loss, you know, fish loss. In years back, in comparison with today, because you can take a large igloo or a got cooler, you know, and fill it full of ice, and as you catch fish, well, just keep them iced down good, and they're always good when you get to the dock. And number-wise, we've been hurt already on kingfish. There's no question of that, and the Spanish mackerel. I don't know whether the mackerel are going to return or not. Same way with the tarpon. In 1956, the Mexican government set up a fertilizer and cat and dog food plant on the Panica River. And there was a rapid decline of tarpon right then because they went to putting what I understood was a chicken wire fence across the river and dynamiting the river and then seining the fish out to use for fertilizer.
That's an even cruder method than purse seining.
Oh, yes, because, you know, you kill all the mamas and the papas and you have no babies. And that's consequently what happened here. And I think that fish tend, as youngsters, tend to travel with the older ones like ducks do on the western flyway, the central flyway, and the eastern flyways. If they were all done away with entirely, and then those ducks would, and as well as fish, wouldn't know which way to travel. So consequently, they're finding their own way. They had no leaders, and they're not coming back to the jetties as rapidly. Of course, also they dammed up the Nueces River.
Yeah, I remember the last time we talked, I think I asked the question very pointedly. What would you say has contributed to the change in the fishing patterns or fishing habits today compared to back in 1941? And you said it was a series of things, not any one thing in particular, but a series. And now you're on your second thing, if you would. Okay, the dams?
Yeah, the dam. See, all fish have got to have fresh water. All seawater fish have got to have a certain amount of fresh water. And when we used to have the flow of the Nueces River, then we had lots of tarpon because it would come through Corpus Bay, dump out of Corpus Bay right in through the ship channel and come out through the pass. Okay, as it dumped out, then it brought proteins and everything right with it, you know, and little fishes, plenty a lot of live shrimp. There was never any lacking for live shrimp.
And there's a delicate balance, or it's about the right salinity of the exchange there, where between the estuaries and the Gulf, the right salinity has to be held for the breeding grounds and all that.
That's true. They go up the rivers to a brackish water. The tarpon, the redfish, the snook, they all move upriver until they hit the right temperature and the right salinity, and then that's when they spawn. And they used to do that here. We used to catch babies that were not any longer than that, you know, just a couple inches long.
Okay, we have two things. And we have, just early crude attempts like commercialization, like dog food and cat food plants and things like that. Then you also had your change in your dams and rivers and your estuary system. And then how about population changes along the Gulf Coast in 20 years, or in 40 years we're talking?
Well, this is what we're talking about, is the pressure. You know, where before, when you used to go out of here at daylight in the morning, you might see 15 boats all day. Now, there's 15 boats around every drilling rig, or every platform, or every standpipe, you know. And the pressure, I think we might have a balance of about the same number of fish, but they've scattered out, for one thing. The fish are like you and me. If we're going to go where the food is easiest to get, so if there's a standpipe up there that's holding acres of fish, then that's where the bigger fish are going to be, the kingfish and the jackfish. And that's my theory there. And then too, of course, is the great populace that we've had. You know, we're thousands more people than what they were then.
Okay.
And also the number of boats and the speed and the electronic equipment.
More population, more factories, your chemical plants and things like that. It has to have some effect. I'm not saying that there, but all of this growth in the last 40 years along the coast and all has got to have.
Well, it certainly did. Like the DDT did on our pelicans.
Yeah, all that fertilizing inland
That's
washes
right.
down.
Washes down, and then gets in it got into the estuaries and where the little fishes were, and then as these pelicans fed on these small fishes, it kept their eggs from hardening the shell. So consequently, their little ones died, even though they did lay the egg. It was nothing there, and they just kept dying off.
What do you remember, Lloyd, in the 1940s when you first started fishing? What do you remember some of your fondest memories, things you really enjoyed doing that maybe you can't do today?
Oh, I don't know. I've enjoyed so much of this part of it, it's unreal. I've traveled so much, you know, been all over the country and fished with so many good fishermen and friends, and that like it goes back to Florida Roberts. Edgar in Florida and I used to fish together lots, and we used to cane pole fish right out there at the end of the South Jetty, and that man was he was an artist.
Florida Roberts?
Yes, he was an artist.
In your opinion, what made him an artist?
The fact that he thought like a fish, so he could catch fish when nobody else could. It was an art. He had it down to a science. I mean, he was fine-tuned.
The weather, the water,
He
the
had
feeling,
the location, everything. He had it all. It was fine-tuned. And being a kid at that time, back before the war, Edgar and I used to go out there with him, and we just sat there, you know, and just bail fish.
What's that, Lloyd?
Kingfish and mackerel with cane poles. Of course, every once in a while, the kingfish get the benefit of us, you know, and he'd take the pole away from us. But
when you weren't really ready for him,
because a lot of times you'd have two cane poles a person. See, we were selling those fish.
That's a while ago I was thinking about that. Were most people in this time, in the 1940s, were they fishing, were they big sportsmen, or were they fishing for fish? Did they enjoy the fish, or how was that?
Well, whenever they'd take a charter, the charter got the fish, so they were sport fishermen. Yeah, you know, I mean, naturally, and they'd ice them all down and take them home. You know, whenever they get in, they'd have them all clean, take them home and eat them. And of course, whenever we went out there strictly commercially fishing.
And would you sell where would you sell them?
To the fish houses.
The fish house.
Yeah, and then the fish house always had an order for them to ship them out somewhere. Most of them went up on the East Coast.
And the fish houses in Aransas Pass or over here?
Oh no, right here in
right
town.
Here.
Yeah, Bill Green's Fish House, and let's see, I believe I was the only one then. in the middle 40s.
How much percentage-wise? I'm curious. Does it break? If you worked real hard commercial fishing as a captain in the 1940s, could you live as well off or be doing as well as a boat captain who works real hard for a week of fishing in the 1980s? Has inflation and costs and things like that changed? Which do you think you really actually probably were doing the best time in?
Well, I believe everything is relative, you know, because what we used to pay, we paid 12 cents a gallon for gas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's 80 cents today, but it has been $1.50.
Mm-hmm.
And our bait, 90% of that we caught. Didn't cost us anything. You buy all the bait today.
And some of that fancy bait's even imported from South America.
It's fierce, yes, and it comes from Florida too. You know, a lot of that. Of course, our baits that we catch here and process are the same things, and they're processed the same way, but it doesn't say Florida on it. So, anyway, that's like I was telling these kids that fish today. I said we use so many black mullet, and we didn't know there was a silver mullet. You know, that we caught all of our fish on those old black mullet, and they don't know that you can catch fish on black mullet. It's got to be a silver side. But anyway, and now they've gone to plastics, so they don't know how to rig a bait. This later generation, they do know how to rig plastics, so they can catch fish on them.
I know
The
the
billfish, but not kingfish and this sort of thing. So we still got the little jump on them there with kingfishing. But they're, you know, but everything considered, I think that the price of food, the price of material, back there then, your dollar would go further than what $10 would buy today. So I think maybe, like I say, everything is pretty much relative.
It kind of balances out, but the pressure's on.
Yeah, the pressure's there, and there's no question but what in time, you know, that we haven't refined lots of things, you know.
That's what I wanted to close with, if I could, Lloyd. Just maybe step back and just think a second or two. We talked about fishing and changes in fishing for 40 years. What do you think it'll be 40 years from now?
Well, I hesitate to even make a ghost of an estimation. My goodness, if my father could see the stuff that we use today that we didn't use in the 40s, he couldn't believe it. He just wouldn't be able to believe it.
You're talking the scanners and depth.
Everything. It's all, of course, it was in a short period of time, if you remember, Jim, that all of this stuff just came to the front. You know, all of the color scanners that we've got for depth recorders, the low rans that put you on wrecks right now. You don't have to go out there with a lead line and find the rocks like we used to, and take 2 or 3 hours to find them, you know. Run by a compass in your watch and say, well, we ought to be there. You know, now you plug in a number on the low ran and you run, and the low ran says, you're here, stop and fish, you know. So there you are. Turn your depth recorder on, you're sitting on top of the rock. See, this kind of stuff. So it takes away all of the time element involved, where before it used to take so long to
more
get
power,
located.
quicker running time.
Yeah, faster boats.
Yeah. If you will, mention one last thing to me, because I don't think I understood. We're overrunning the fish. When you say we're overrunning the fish, what are we doing, Lloyd?
Well, the fish will more than likely tell you where they are if you'll pay attention to them. This is what my dad used to tell me. Most of the time where you see those shrimp boats working and things like that, they've already found all the bait. They'll be in 2 areas as a rule. One of them in there between 12 and 16 fathoms, and the other one out here will be between 24 and 36 to 40 fathoms. Somewhere in there, all those other fish are going to be. Not all of them. I mean, you're going to find some
Sure.
offshore, but in there where these shrimp boats are working and things, that's where most of your fish are going to be. And during, let's see, a couple of the tournaments, that's where all of the marlin and the sailfishers were caught.
Yeah, I think I was reading about one of the tournaments just this summer, and it was close to a shrimp boat.
That's right, 34 fathoms.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest blue marlin in the tournament. That's what's happening.
Lloyd, on behalf of the Port Aransas Public Library, I'd like to thank you for sharing your memories with us on Port Aransas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.